week we're going to start talking about the beginning of American Romanticism, which happened shortly after the colonial period, and even to some degree within the colonial period. So when the English were in America and they were settling, and we had all of the colonies, and we dealt with the struggles between the Native American tribes and the settlers, and the other things going on with the Puritan culture and the kind of repression that it had. America was considered kind of a backwater town. I mean, this is not where the intellectuals were going to start a new country and to begin a new thinking. It kind of evolved slowly. So in 1820, Sidney Smith of the Edinburgh Review said, "In the four corners of the globe, who reads an American book?" So no one was in the world was interested in reading American books, except maybe Americans. So just a few months before Smith posed that question, an American writer named Washington Irving began publishing a series of essays and tales that he called the Sketchbook. So the first true American writer was Washington Irving, and the Sketchbook made him the first American writer to achieve international fame. It sought to entertain. It was not what set colonial writing apart was partially its desire to elevate God and to make and to chronicle the history of the people. But Washington Irving just wanted to write a story that people would listen to and people would read to each other. So this was the first writer to actually do that. Washington Irving lived from 1783 to 1859. He was born in New York City near present-day Wall Street. He was the youngest of 11 children, and his parents were Scottish-English immigrants. So let's give you some biographical information. His parents greatly admired General George Washington, hence his name, Washington Irving. His father became a wealthy merchant. Irving trained as a lawyer, but practiced only briefly, and he showed literary promise early in his life. So this is the home of Washington Irving, this little small building amidst the tall buildings in New York City. His writing career began around 1802, wherein he published a series of newspaper articles. And then in 1807, he published the Salmagundi Papers. In 1809, he published his first major work, which was a history of New York. It was supposedly written by Dietrich Knickerbocker, which was an old eccentric historian. And this was his pseudonym before we knew him as Washington Irving. This piece, this History of New York, marked Irving's future course. It was designed solely for entertainment. It taught no serious moral lessons. And then late in 1809, about that same time, his fiancée died, which kind of accounts for some of the melancholic cast that's over some of his works and the rest of his life. His career shifts to Europe in 1815. He sailed for England to take charge of the family business in Liverpool. When the family business bankrupted, he concentrated on his literary career. And at the time, a literary career was kind of like striving for, international fame, kind of how actors and actresses do. Some people wrote really well and bringing themselves and their families much fame and fortune. These were kind of like the rock stars of the time period. Irving traveled throughout England, France, Spain, Germany, and Switzerland, and he even wrote a history of Christopher Columbus. His literary career continued. From 1819 to 1820, he published the Sketchbook of Geoffrey Crayon, a Gent. So this included the famous works Rip Van Winkle and The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. He used a few pseudonyms while he was writing. The first one I mentioned before was Dietrich Knickerbocker. Then it was Jonathan Oldstyle and Geoffrey Crayon. He became widely recognized. By the late 1820s, Irving had gained a reputation throughout Europe and America as a great writer and thinker. In 1832, he returned to New York and established his home Sunnyside in Tarrytown, New York, which is the setting for The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. He never married or had children, so for the next 25 years, he shared Sunnyside with his brother Ebenezer and then Ebenezer's 5 daughters. Rip Van Winkle and The Legend of Sleepy Hollow became the first genuine American stories. The stories contained distinctive American settings and characters. These stories incorporated the German folk tales and legends. So we start kind of seeing how an ancestry apart from or in addition to England, makes its way into American culture. And this is kind of like the beginning of the melting pot in terms of literature.